One time, my parents had left for work. My sisters had gone to school, and I, 20-year-old female, was alone at home. My neighborhood is in a fairly secluded area, situated on top of a huge hill, so it's fairly rare to have anyone visit. I was lounging around watching TV when I heard the doorbell ring. I never answered the door as, again, we never have anyone visit and my family obviously knows how to get inside themselves. So I ignored it, even when it rang a second time. By the third time, I was a little annoyed and I tiptoed over to the front door. The front entrance of our house is essentially a big wooden door surrounded by wall, so there isn't any way for us to check who's on the outside unless we go to our piano room and check out the window. This means that there's no way for anyone on the outside to know if we're there unless we're stomping around in the house. So I stood behind the front door, waiting for the person to leave. I mean, no one has answered your third doorbell ring. Surely you'd leave, right? Suddenly, there was heavy banging on the door, which made me jump. I heard a man's deep voice speak from the other side of the door. "I know you're there." My heart jumped and got caught in my throat, and for a second, I'm looking around trying to figure out how the man knew. After a long silence, I heard muffled chatter, then the sound of footsteps leaving. I didn't dare to open the door in case they actually hadn't left. After I called my parents to check if anyone was meant to be visiting, which they weren't, I was a little surprised by the odd encounter, but eventually I went back to watching TV and soon forgot about it. 2 hours later, I hear the doorbell ring again. Feeling a sense of nervousness, I turned down the TV volume. This time, I got up slowly and snuck over to the piano room, where I could possibly sneak a peek and see who was there. I knelt down and slowly raised my head over the sill to see. At the door was a woman dressed in all black. Black high heels, a plain black dress which came down to mid-calf, and an unusually large black-brimmed hat, which was bizarre considering it was summer and very hot. She had long dark brown hair, though her face was covered by the brim of her hat. The only thing I could see were her bright red lips pulled up in an eerily wide smile. Beside her was a tall, buff guy wearing a dark suit. I don't remember much of his features, except that he was a Caucasian man and had a very serious expression. What disturbed me most wasn't so much the intimidating guy, but the sight of the woman who stood there literally unmoving, smiling at the front door, which was yet to be opened. It felt like a solid minute before she finally took a step back and without a word began to walk down the driveway. The man followed her step. To this day, I'm not sure who she was, why they were at the door, and whether they were the ones who had knocked on the door earlier. But needless to say, the deep voice calling, "I know you're in there," and the image of the woman in black was not one I forgot easily. I will try to make this story short, so bear with me. When I was 23 years old, 4 years ago, I was living alone in a studio one-room apartment I just started renting. There were a lot of windows in it, along with a backyard, but not very big. Anyways, 3 weeks in, I started noticing a lot of things such as my barbecue grill being moved, not in the same place I remember seeing them the night before. I remember out loud saying to myself, "What the hell?" but never really giving it much thought. Well, I should have. One evening, I hear some loud bangs on the deck floor above my studio. I guess it's called a balcony. I woke up and just sat there listening, trying to figure out what it was. Not even 2 seconds later, I hear a crash at ground level, my level. The back door was a giant glass sliding door, and the blinds were outside of it. They were electronically controlled from the inside. I left them slightly cracked at the bottom before I went to sleep. I looked under it, kind of laying on the ground to see, and behold, I see 2 boots right in front of me. They must have been trying to hear inside through the blinds. I could feel a giant sense of danger overcome me like a freaking blanket. Myself, being a combat veteran, immediately, almost subconsciously, decided I was going out there. I grabbed my firearm, a Glock 19, and yanked the door open. The blinds were still down, to see if he'd freak out not being able to see me, but know someone was there. I didn't hear a thing. I pressed the button to raise the blinds and stepped back into the room. Like out of a fucking movie, we eventually made eye contact. He looked high as hell or drunk or something. I then said calmly for him to leave or he'll die. He could see the pistol in my hand. Very calmly, he didn't say a word. He just bolted away over the back gate. I filed a police report and that was that. Crazy to think of that now. I had almost forgotten about it. Anyways, moral of the story. Don't sit there and wait to be a victim. Victimize them. Be safe, guys. This happened a few years ago in my old one-person flat. I had a strange feeling that something wasn't right for a few days. Like I was sure that the food in the fridge was less than I put back the last time. I found pillows from my couch on the floor, stuff like that. I lived alone back then, so there wasn't anyone else with access to my flat, or so I thought. Well, one night I woke up around 1 in the morning, sweating, and even though I didn't remember, was sure I woke up from a nightmare. Since I was drenched in sweat, I decided to take a shower, so I put my phone up in the bathroom for music, turned on the water, and enjoyed my shower. A few minutes in, I heard the door move. I never close it, but it still never moves. I took a look at the shower curtain and saw a shadow against it, and a look at my phone confirmed someone was there, since I could clearly see a reflection in my screen that showed someone standing next to the shower curtain. It took me a lot not to scream and to keep acting like I didn't notice anything, while silently taking the shower head off the holding and turning the water all the way to hot. I'm still kind of impressed of that quick thinking. Our water got really hot when you cranked it all the way to hot, and a few seconds later, steam was raising and the water hurt my feet flowing to the drain. I turned around, ripped the shower curtain open, and held the shower head right at the person behind it. It was a woman. She screamed in pain. I whacked her in the face with the shower head and jumped out of the shower and ran to the door, taking the key out of the lock and locking it closed behind me. A little later, she started to bang on the door, but the door didn't give. I called the cops and went to the kitchen to get my big kitchen knife, just for safety. I felt like my throat was closing up when I saw it missing and realized there's only one place where it could possibly be right now. The police came and arrested the woman, who turned out to have been the former person living in the flat and was evicted after not paying rent. Seems she made a copy of the key and came into the flat when I was at work and sometimes at night. It's possible that what woke me up in the first place was her, and honestly, I don't even want to think about it. Ever since then, I always insist that the locks are changed when I move into a new place. So this happened about 3 years ago when I was a sophomore in college. I had just moved into my very first apartment with my best friend Ron. On par with most first apartments, it was the cheapest 4 walls and a roof we could afford. With that being said, we were witness to a lot of questionable activities as our complex was home to a fair amount of eccentric people. Yet the freedom of having your very own place is exhilarating and acted as sort of a counterbalance to the shenanigans that were commonplace in our new community. In any case, we made sure to be vigilant and keep our doors locked. Well, most of the time. It was a Monday around 2 in the afternoon, and I was just getting back from my morning string of classes. Ron dabbles in gamer culture and would usually be going to bed when I got up, around 9 a.m., so he was dead asleep. I was in sort of a rush as I had to finish up a paper for my 4 p.m. class, so I swiftly went to my room. I pulled out my laptop, plugged in my headphones, and began to type away. After about 30 minutes of typing, ABBA blaring in my ears, I noticed my door begin to open. The movement was lethargic and cautious, yet it stopped abruptly after the door had opened about an inch wide. More specifically, after I took notice. Unable to see anything through the open sliver, I became inquisitive. Assuming it's Ron, I call out, "What?" No response. "What do you want?" No response. "Bro, what the hell do you want?" The door remained cracked as I demanded answers until my annoyance became clear and my tone began to change. Then it methodically closed, as slowly as it was opened. So slow, in fact, it almost didn't latch. Still, under the assumption it's Ron, I began to get even more annoyed. Ron and I have a colorful relationship. so we frequently yell or swear at each other. Bro, seriously, what the hell do you want? I'm trying to write a paper. Ron? Ron, stop messing with me, bro, and just tell me what you want. After about the third yell, something makes my heart sink into my stomach. Bells begin to ring in my head, and my gut is convinced something's wrong. It wasn't like Ron to mess with me like that, and even if he did decide to break habit, he would have come back and done the "it's just a prank, bro" routine long before I started yelling. I sprung up from my bed, heart racing, blood pumping, adrenaline flowing. I reach under my pillow and grasp the cold metal sheath of the M7 bayonet my dad had bought me some odd years ago. Everyone made fun of me for sleeping with it, but look who's laughing now. I take the blade out and begin to move towards the door, cautiously calling out to Ron one last time just to make sure my paranoia isn't getting the best of me. Alright, Ron, did you need something? Greeted with silence yet again, I take that as my cue to exit the room. I grasped the doorknob and began to twist ever so slowly, my stomach twisting right alongside it. With a distinctive click, the door unlatches and I begin to tenderly open it. As soon as there's enough room, I peer my head out into the hallway. Nothing. I finally take a step out, and as my body crosses the threshold from room to hallway, my adrenaline spikes. Knife in hand, I make my way to the living room with a simultaneous sense of cautiousness and urgency. I make the 15-foot journey to the living room and do a scan of the area. Nothing. Upon seeing the empty, quiet living room, my body immediately relaxes. My grip on the handle of the bayonet loosens, allowing my knuckles to go from a ghostly white back to their normal pink, fleshy color. However, my moment of relief was shortly lived as something dawned on me. The living room was empty, as in devoid of human presence. I turn back to the hallway and sprint to Ron's room. Unafraid to forego common courtesies, I barge right in. As the door swings open and I take my first steps inside, I'm once again met with a gut-wrenching feeling and a modest spike of adrenaline. Ron was dead asleep. With a mix of yelling and shaking, I finally wake him up. A very groggy and pissed Ron mumbles a "what?" over my franticness. Already knowing the answer, I ask one question out of denial and hope. "Did you open my door a couple minutes ago?" "No, what?" As the sound of the most hated word in the English language fell upon my ears, I was already halfway out of Ron's room. As I re-entered the living room, I gave things a second look. Upon further inspection, I noticed the absence of my Xbox, my roommate's PS4, and my roommate's backpack, filled with expensive college textbooks and his laptop. I sprint out of the front door and up the stairs to the outside of my complex, desperately trying to see someone carrying a backpack and/or a game console. I run the perimeter and find nothing. Defeated, I make my way back to the apartment and find Ron standing in the living room, still groggy and very much confused. I explained the situation we now found ourselves in. We called the cops, which took our statements and nothing more. The interactions we had with the PD is another long story, one filled with the worst instances of incompetence and stupidity I have ever seen. But to sum them up, the person who opened the door that day was never arrested. This in spite of the fact it is considered felony home invasion since Ron and I were home, and my father literally figured out who did it. So unless it's to give me back my Xbox or Ron his PS4 and backpack, let's not meet again. So this happened a couple years ago when I was 13 and my brother was 11. My parents had to go out and thought it would be better to leave me and my brother home alone, so that's what they did, and they left taking my sister, age 6, with them. Me and my brother were all the way down in our basement, which is where we had our video game set up. So the two of us were just downstairs playing Mario Kart on our Wii. We had the home phone in between us, just in case one of our parents called. About an hour goes by and the phone starts to ring. We look down at the caller ID, and it's our uncle. We decided to just let it ring, and how our phone worked was it would ring about 5 times then stop. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 ring. The phone stops ringing. My brother doesn't pay attention to it, but I do. I realized that the only reason for it to stop that early is if someone picked it up. We were home alone. I got really suspicious, and my paranoia got the better of me, and I take my brother and we go upstairs. We see that the phone is still there, but there's yet one more phone on the 3rd floor in my parents' room. So we go towards the stairs, and what we saw chilled us to the bone. A man, late 40s, early 50s, is all I can really tell you, because the second we saw him, me and my brother scream, run out of our front door, and go straight to our neighbor's house. We tell them what happened, and they proceed to call the police, then our parents. They come fast, and I don't know what was wrong with the man, but he never left the house. He just stood there, and the police arrested him. From what I heard, he was placed in a mental hospital, but that's just what I heard. The story may not be totally crazy compared to others, but I just think, what could have happened to me and my brother if my uncle didn't decide to call? This happened when I was about 16 or 17. I'm 26 now, but I'll never forget that night. My parents had left me alone for a few hours while they went out on a date. It was some Friday in September. I remember that because school had just started up again. I was in the living room watching some TV. Must have been around 11 at night. All the lights were off in the rest of the house. So our television was in the basement, which only had those small half windows, and we had thick curtains on those windows. If all the lights were off in the house, you probably never would see the light from the TV from the outside. That and the fact that there was no car in the driveway, it most likely looked like no one was home. Anyways, I was downstairs watching a show when I heard someone knock on the front door. I didn't know who would be knocking at that time of night, and to be honest, I was too scared to go and look. I figure whoever it was would go away if I didn't answer. Kind of dumb reasoning now looking back on it, but when you're a teen, you don't really think those things through. The knocking stopped pretty quickly, and I did sneak upstairs to look out the window. There was no one on the front porch by the time I got there. I also should have turned on some lights to make it look like people were home, but I didn't do that either. Once I was on the top stair to go back to finish my show, I heard breaking glass from the sliding door. I nearly pissed myself and ran downstairs as fast as I could and locked myself in my bedroom. I could hear someone running up the stairs to my parents' bedroom as I picked up the phone and called my dad. The sounds from the upstairs were terrible. It sounded like whoever was up there was ransacking the place. I could hear the dresser drawers being thrown onto the floor and glass breaking. My dad answered his phone, and I told him what was going on. He said for me to stay hidden, that they were almost home, and that he was going to call the police. It felt like forever, but was probably no more than 5 minutes. I could hear feet on the stairs coming down. The burglar must have been halfway down the stairs when my dad finally pulled into the driveway. Maybe the intruder saw the headlights from the car, or maybe he heard my mom and dad talking loudly when the car door shut, but next I heard him run over broken glass and out the back door. I called my dad to tell him the person left. Cops were there only seconds after that. Whoever it was that broke into our house had taken some cash and jewelry from my parents' room, a small television they had up there, and a few other small electronics. The police searched the area and found him a few blocks away, hiding in someone's backyard. Since I didn't see anything, I didn't have to testify. The fact that he had my parents' belongings and a previous record was enough to put him in jail for a good while. It was a few years back when this happened. I was living with my then boyfriend at the time. We had a ground floor apartment we were renting in a nice cozy suburb. Never in the world would have imagined something like this would happen there. My boyfriend worked nights as an EMT, so he wasn't home at night, and getting a hold of him was always difficult. Because of this, he bought me a large dog so I would feel safe. I stayed up late binge watching something on Netflix. All the lights in the place were off and all of that. It was summer and our AC was on the fritz. The landlord was going to come by the next day and look at the window unit, but at the time it was off, so I had the windows open for airflow. My dog, Benny, must have heard it first because his ears perked up and he looked at me in a puzzled way. I'm a female and I have a particularly soft voice, so when I asked Benny what it was, it didn't travel too far. I'm saying that because I don't know if what happened next would have happened if the person knew I was home. A bit after Benny looked at me, I heard something crash in the bedroom. I screamed and Benny barked. He then ran to the room and burst through the door. I heard another scream and a thud. Benny was growling and barking. I was shaking in my shoes. I made out some curse words from the intruder as he ran away. When I got to the bedroom, Benny was staring at the window with the hair on his neck raised. The picture frame I kept on my dresser in front of the window had been knocked over. I went to go calm Benny down and turned on the light. There was a pretty good-sized puddle of blood on the dresser and claw marks on the front too. Benny had blood around his mouth as well. I think that whoever tried to come in had been bitten by Benny, and he ran away after that. Benny got lots of treats and cuddles from then on, and I'm never scared when he's with me. "20-year-old female here. This happened a few weeks ago when I was home alone. My roommates had all gone out for the night. I wasn't feeling well, so I stayed home. My bedroom is on the second floor. This is important. Right outside my window is the roof for the garage. I was laying in bed feeling like I was about to die from the cold I had. Lights were out and I was watching TV. The back of my bed and the front of the television both face the window. I turned off the TV to go to bed. I should also say that there's a street light right outside the window that shines into my room. So I turned off the TV and laid there for a second. At first, I thought something was wrong with the TV because it looked like it still had a faint picture on it. It took me a minute to realize that it wasn't a picture from the TV, but the silhouette of someone's head backlit by the street lamp reflecting off the television. I laid there, paralyzed in fear as I saw the head scan my room back and forth. Whoever it was just sat there and watched me for a while. I didn't move. I wasn't sure what to do. After a few minutes, the person left. I was almost in tears when I heard their footsteps move away from the window and a faint thud from the landing in their yard. I ran and turned on all the lights and made sure everything was locked up. I didn't sleep until my friends came back late that night. The thought of what would have happened if they had decided to break in scared me to death. I was sick as hell and in no position to defend myself. I talked my roommates into getting some security lights put up around the house, and haven't had anything like that happen since. This happened when I was 14. My parents had split up. My dad lived out of state. My mom worked nights so she could be home with us during the day. I was alone with my little brother who had gone to bed early. Usually, before bed, I did last-minute checks on all the doors and whatnot. Even at 14, I was a pretty paranoid person. I had just checked the lock on the front door and was walking away when I heard the door handle jiggle. I stopped for a second to listen to see if it was just my imagination or something. Then I heard it jiggle again. My breath caught in my throat and I almost gagged on it. It then sounded like the person on the other side of the door was trying to jimmy the lock. I turned on the front porch light and heard a man's voice clearly say, "Shit!" Then I heard him fumble around for a second. I ran to the front window and saw a guy dressed all in black sprint through the front yard and out onto the street. Needless to say, I called my mom right away. She told her boss what had happened and came straight home. After that, she bought us a dog so someone would be there to protect us while she went to work at night. Even to this day, I check all the locks before I go to bed, and I now keep a baseball bat in my room, just in case.
This happened a few days ago, and I'm extremely shaken up. Some backstory. I live on the second floor of a 3-level apartment. We have a crawl space that connects all of the apartments. We're not sure why it's there, and none of us would attempt to go inside, so we felt pretty safe. The other night the sun was setting, but it wasn't pitch black out yet or anything. I was walking through my living room when I see a short woman on the fire escape looking through my windows. This was extremely bizarre, considering it was still semi-light out, and she had literally got onto our fire escape somehow. We have 2 windows that the fire escape reaches. She was looking through both of them, but couldn't see me. I crawled on the ground and my heart was racing as I saw her try to open one of the windows. I didn't know what the fuck to do because my phone was in the other room. After what seemed like an eternity, she finally left. I went into my room to get my phone to text my landlord and call the cops. I came back into the living room and was looking through the windows to see if I could locate her, when all of a sudden I hear a weird noise coming from the ceiling. We have one of those tile ceilings, made out of separate slabs of cork. I look up to see one of the slabs lifted up and two eyes staring at me. I have no clue how she got into the crawl space so quickly, but I grabbed the nearest thing next to me, which was a broom, and started hitting her with it through the ceiling. I called the cops and she crawled away. They showed up and searched the place, but didn't find her until a few days later when she was on someone else's fire escape. The cops say she was definitely on some hard drugs, and that she was violent towards them. I'm glad she's gone, but whoever the crazy lady was that came through the ceiling, let's not meet again. For the past 2 months or so, I've been experiencing people trying to get into my home. Now, I wouldn't say that they tried forcefully, but if it's not the doorknob being messed with, I'm hearing the back porch door being slammed. I haven't notified the police, mainly because it wouldn't happen regularly, and just thought it would be a waste of time, seeing that all the evidence I have is noises that I've heard. But last night's encounter might have been the nail in the coffin, as I'm generally creeped out by it this time. So here it goes. It was maybe around 11:30 p.m. I was laying in bed, enjoying another night after work, watching TV, and that's when I hear a slight tap coming from my brother's window. This made me a bit tense since the other occurrences happened earlier in the night, but this time it was way later than usual, and I had never heard tapping on the window before. I stayed quiet, and maybe not even 5 minutes later, I hear it again, but this time it's coming from my room. Some time passes by, and that's when I hear a sudden knocking coming from the front door. I continue to stay in silence, hoping that they would just leave, and that's when I hear them messing with the doorknob. A few attempts are made, and then everything goes silent once again until they start harmonizing with each other. This is when I decided to pull out my phone and record. After that, I guess they decided to leave for good, as I didn't have the guts to interact with them. All I know is that things are getting freakier than I could ever imagine, and I don't even know how to begin to get rid of them. This is my brother's girlfriend's story. She doesn't have a Reddit, but I told her about this subreddit and she wanted to share her story because it's creepy, but also because you can learn from it. I go to school in a big city that is one of the least safe cities in the United States. I chose this school for nursing and definitely not for the location. I live in a row house off campus with 3 other girls, cheaper and nicer than dorms, or so we thought. I guess you get what you pay for. We are all girls and sophomores in college. As you would guess, we go out for drinks, come back to things that we don't remember. We just started our rent in August, 3 floors, plus a basement, which was padlocked by the owner. Understandable, we would definitely have parties down there to avoid immediate cleanup. The house was great. Amazing location to school and work. I am a CNA who works odd hours, which will be important later. It was not expensive and in good condition. I had never lived with this many people before, just one roommate, so before we would definitely know if someone had misplaced or changed something. I started to notice that my snacks would either be half gone or completely gone. I was getting annoyed, but in a house of many people, it was too much work to try to figure out who ate it, so I just ignored it. Slowly, as girls do, we started making comments about someone eating our food, but in a passive-aggressive way. We all just let it go, cause who wants a whole house fight? I worked until about 11 o'clock in the NICU, and get home about 11:30 mostly on weeknights. I started to notice pants left out or snack wrappers around. I thought it was odd cause none of my roommates had done this before, but I just think, oh, they probably drank a bottle of wine and went to bed and forgot about this. Again, my roommate started making comments, This time, we started asking because it was getting annoying that all our food being gone and things being left out. I knew it was one of them, but who wants to admit that they ate someone else's snack when in college snacks are in high commodity? We chalked it up to the girl who always smokes and eats her weight in food, but she swore it wasn't her. This went on for about 2 months. It got more obvious someone was clearly taking everyone's food. Definitely the girl who always smokes. I see her as being someone that would eat the whole snack pantry at night. I wish it was her. One night at work, I was about to get off, but a situation happened and I didn't end up leaving until 12:30. I took the bus home. I carry pepper spray, a taser, and a pocket knife, don't worry. I got home and was about to collapse. I wanted to go to bed as soon as possible. I walk in the front door, and the stairs are directly in front of you. You can also see down the side into the kitchen. I walk in and saw someone in the kitchen, but I was too tired to say hi, thinking I could end up in a 30-minute conversation about nothing, so I went straight upstairs. When I got up to the second floor, I noticed that all my roommates' doors were closed, which always meant that they were in their rooms for the night or asleep. I got a weird feeling. Just something that made it click. They were all asleep, right? I text our house group chat, asking if anyone was in the kitchen. I felt stupid for even asking. 2 responded no, and said the other 2 had been asleep. I knew it wasn't any of my roommates down there at that moment. I dialed 911, but didn't press call. I crept into my roommate's room, access hall. Thankfully, or maybe not thankfully, she didn't have her door locked. I whispered, telling her that someone was in the house. She gave me the widest eyes ever, and almost looked like she was about to cry. She didn't suspect anything like I had, but for reference, we live in a very bad area, as there was a shooting in the house 2 doors down, only weeks earlier, by an intruder. She mouthed to make a call. The whole time we were dead silent. We didn't really hear anything at all. I was starting to think I was seeing things after such a long day, and regretted that I dialed, thinking I was going to look like an idiot when they showed up, and I was just overtired and dreaming. We explained to the operator what was going on, and they said that they would send someone as soon as possible. That actually doesn't mean right away, since it's a big and dangerous city. The police showed up, and I didn't even want to go downstairs, but the operator confirmed that it was them, so I did. But the whole time, I could swear that the operator could hear my heart beating. The police came in and looked around. I'm thinking, oh god, I look so dumb. They asked if there was any other floors. We tell them technically the basement, but it's padlocked, so really no. They checked the basement just in case, and yeah, they were right. The man had been living in the padlocked basement. The lock was pulled off its hinges and just kind of propped against the wall. We never looked back there, and rarely went out back. The guy had taken a comforter of one of my roommates out of the hall, had a mattress from God knows where, and his clothes. Well, he was the one moving and eating all of our stuff. He would come out in the middle of the night and do it. He started getting more comfortable. I don't know if he was drugged out, or forgot to clean his tracks, or if he didn't really care. My roommates and I have pretty consistent schedules during the week, probably letting him think that any time after 12 was good to come out. We never slept with our individual doors locked, and that freaks me out the most. He had access to any one of us at any moment, and we had no idea. When he was getting arrested, I was the only one to go down and look. I don't really know why, and I wish I didn't. I took a picture in the process of him being arrested to show my roommates who were too afraid to go down, and this is him. So yeah, let's never actually meet, dude.